Hi, I'm Samantha Bee, and I am obsessed with choice. Not just choice, but choice has. Like, supposedly, the average person makes 35,000 decisions per day, and I believe it. For example, here I am talking to you in my basement, physically cold, and I'm tangled up in cables because I made the choice to prioritize literally anything but my own comfort for our first official recording. Why? Because great art can only be made in a state of mild distress? I don't know. Lately, I personally have been the beneficiary of some choices made by other people. My TV show ended. I will say that at that point, I'd been on TV for 20 years straight. So the question I was asking myself was, well, who am I if I'm not on TV? I thought I would be fine, but a lot of people around me kept saying that it would be really hard. But I was pretty sure I had a healthy sense of self and that my ego isn't wrapped up in having airtime. Like, my sense of self is not dependent on being marginally famous. So all of a sudden, I was forced to confront that specter of being off TV for an unknown amount of time, maybe 3 months, but also maybe forever. So there were choices to be made: to not wallow, to allow myself to grieve and feel weird and be weird, to feel mad, to feel sad, to feel happy, which also somehow made me feel guilty. But then ultimately to put one foot in front of the other and just forge ahead. And then I got offered this great job, a play in New York, which I said yes to immediately because it was prestigious and it felt so nice to be wanted and appreciated and to have someone like urgently feel that need to snap me up. And it definitely was prestigious. It really was the kind of opportunity that comes to you once in a lifetime. Total dream job. But yet I realized that this was actually the wrong choice for me because it wasn't sitting easily in my psyche. I kept waking up in the night and worrying about it like a little, just like a little pebble in my shoe. And I think that is because my initial yes, if I'm being perfectly honest, was driven by ego rather than a real desire to do the actual hard job of actually being on a stage night after night, bringing someone else's thoughts and words to life, as good as they were, and they were good. So instead, awkwardly, with no panache at all or class, I pulled myself out in a terrified, like, what the fuck am I doing? I would have killed for this 20 years ago way. And I decided instead to speak my own words from the heart in two ways: a podcast, which, by the way, welcome, and a live touring show. Because when I really took a stark look at it, I kept saying to myself, all that is left is to speak from the heart in a totally uncompromising way until the end of your days, Samantha Bee. So, okay, heavy. I booked dates before I had a concept. I said yes, and I committed to the process before having a single clue what any of it would look like. In short, I made a choice to bet on myself. And let me tell you something, I have never felt more free. This is Choice Words. I love talking to people, hearing their stories, learning about their choices, what went into making a decision when so often all we see is the public outcome. So thanks for joining me on this first episode of Choice Words. Today, I'm joined by TV host, actor, and comedian Rosie O'Donnell, who's made some pretty big choices in her life and her career. Her new podcast, Onward, is available wherever you're listening to this. Enjoy and make good choices.
Hi. So happy to see you.
I'm so happy to see your face. This is a total thrill for me. Rosie and I did a play together. We did an off-Broadway show called
Yes.
Love, Loss, and What I Wore. And that's how we met each other, doing these great
Right.
monologues about like what the outfits that you wear and your
Yes.
identity. And,
A little bit ahead of its time now when you think back on it, right?
they really could do that show again. And it would
Yes.
feel very, very timely. And then you
Yes.
had such a nice bond with my mother in law, and you sent her like such a huge like loads of Eileen Fisher clothing. And she
Well,
just,
I had a fight with Eileen Fisher. She
I
made me
remember,
very mad. Remember opening
I
night, she was
do.
like saying, I said, I just want to thank you because your clothes are don't shame people who are heavy because their sizes are 1, 2, and 3 in the
Mhm.
plus, not like double X, triple X.
Right.
And she goes, well, actually, that's not our normal size. I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "We
What?
we don't we don't design for that size. We designed for a normal size too." Now listen, since have
Right.
come to find out that she's very nervous person, that
Mhm.
she's has a lot of anxiety about speaking publicly and
Mhm.
and she was very kind in apologizing, but it was such a gut like wrenching hard
Yes.
pain in my a knife in my heart rather that I said to your mom, to mother-in-law that we were talking, and I said, God damn it, I'm never wearing my Eileen Fisher. She said, send them to me. I said, done. And I sent her all my Eileen Fisher
Well, I
clothes.
have to tell you, she's still dining
She's
out
rocking them. She's
from
rocking them.
that. She's rocking those Fishers.
Yeah.
She's rocking those cardigans. She was
They
like, I've
last forever. They
they
last
do.
forever.
They're incredible
Yes.
quality. This podcast brought to you by Eileen Fisher.
Eileen Fisher.
Okay, so this podcast that we're going to talk about your podcast. Right now
Whatever.
yeah.
Let's do this one. What's your
Let's
idea?
just
Because I didn't have an idea. You're smarter than me. You have a good idea.
it is a good idea, but you have an idea. Yours is onward. It's like,
Well, it's just I got to 60 and I went,
yeah,
you know what? Everything else that's happened in the past, I can't fix now.
right.
Onward for the last part of our life. But I
Onward.
didn't have like an idea. Like they told me to the premise, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I have a lot of options of where I could answer this.
Right. Yes. So
Yeah.
we're talking about big choices because for my own part, was faced with these big choices. My
Yeah.
television show got canceled. Totally fine. But
Right.
then you kind of have to make some big choices in that moment. You're like, well,
Yes.
first of all, literally, who am I if I'm not doing this job? With this job, it wasn't my identity, but you think it's
Of
you
course.
feel like it's your identity for a really
Y-
long time. And then you're like, well, who am I? What's next? Is there anything next? What are the choices that I'm going to make? What are the bad ones that have led me here? What are the good ones that have led me here? So I'm so curious about, because you've made some big swings. You've made big
Yes,
choices.
indeed.
And
I
we've
know.
and we've kind of witnessed them, or like witnessed them from a distance.
Yeah.
So I wonder, if you think about some of the big choices that you've made, are there any that you look back on that surprise you, or any that stand out to you as like a real pivot point?
Well, I think career-wise, it's
Hmm.
very interesting that I can make the choice in one category or the other, in my
Hmm.
private life or in my career. But the biggest one was leaving the show when I left
Right.
because, I was turning 40 and my mother died at 39
Hmm.
and I had all these little kids and she never got to, come to a little league game. She never got to she was a PTA mother up until the 5th grade, which is the year she died that I was in 5th grade.
Hmm.
She was in the PTA and was very sort of known in the school. I remember when she would walk in the elementary school, and here she had 5 children all in elementary school at once,
Right.
and all the teachers would come out because they were young. It was the 60s. It was a new, um, development in Long Island that were sprouting up in the 60s, and the school was new and the teachers were in their 20s, and they apparently thought she was a riot because I used to watch through the window how the other teachers would laugh and their
Ah,
shoulders would go, and
yeah.
I'd watch my mom kind of making quips. And I remember one time I went to the PTA with her because was sick or had come from a sports thing, and I went with her and watched her kind of do
Right.
stand up, Sam, right in front of
Right.
all these parent teacher association. And I remember thinking, wow, that's powerful. Look at how she controlled the whole room,
Hmm.
you know? And I knew that she wanted more than anything was to participate with her 5 children. She was an only
Right.
child. So I felt I kind of owed it to myself, to
Mm.
her, and to my own children to be done when I had enough money and accolades and adoration. And I knew it was time to give myself to my kids and to step away from this very loud career where you always
Right.
have to sort of be on and there's always something a little bit more important. And
Right.
there's a dinner with Hillary Clinton, and there's a charity I have to go to. I remember Parker was 5 and he said, why
Mhm.
are you going out again? And I said, well, there are some kids that don't have enough money for medicine, and mommy's going to go do a fundraiser and help take care of those kids. And he said,
Yeah.
why don't you stay home and take care of us?
Um, uh,
Sammy was 5,
5.
5 years old.
See, looking directly down the barrel of your soul.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
So when the deal came up, I had told everyone I was only going to do 5 years on the talk show.
Mhm.
And then I would be 40 and I would go about my life and, take occasional acting things if I was lucky enough to get them. But, I had had a pretty good run of it and a bunch of
Right.
movies and then this successful show
Right.
that I felt finished and I felt certain that the next thing I had to do was focus on raising my kids. And so that's the one I think of when we talk about career.
Right.
But the other one that is as big
Mhm.
was the decision to adopt another baby at 50.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. What made you make that choice? How did you come to that?
It's funny. I had a heart attack
Okay. Mhm.
and I was looking for a reason to live in some way. I didn't know it
Right.
until I got a phone call. I went to the publicist Lois Smith. You remember Lois
Yeah,
Smith?
yeah, yeah.
She formed PNK with Pat Kingsley, and she
Mhm.
was Marilyn Monroe's publicist, Meryl Streep. She was
Right.
everyone's, right?
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I was like her last client that she took on. And she had passed away in a terrible accident, fell down the stairs. And
Oh.
I was at her funeral. And someone came up to me and said, oh, by the way, I'm using that lawyer that you used to adopt Parker. And I said, not possible. He retired. He had a medical condition and he retired. She said, well, he's come back in a very small, exclusive kind of adoption agency. And
Mhm.
so on the way home, I called him up and said, hey, it's Rosie. Are you okay? I'm happy to hear you're back working. And
Yeah.
casually mentions we have a birth mother that would like to make sure that the child is in a house with no dad or brothers or older men in.
Mhm.
So I was like, why don't you tell her it's me and ask her if she would do an open adoption and sign some non-disclosures so we could keep as much of it private
Sure.
as possible, but give her access. And this was not how I did my other adoptions 20 years ago because
Right.
it was different then.
Yeah.
Adoptions were closed and people who were famous always did closed for fear of,
Sure.
crises and publicity. And so that I think was my biggest pivot as a non-career move. And it has changed my life in so many ways, Sam. You can't
Oh.
even begin. Like, I always make the joke, well, I turned 50 and I
Mhm.
could either have a facelift or adopt a baby. And I chose the infant, I took the infant. But she has autism.
Mhm.
She is non-binary. She is creative and quirky and
Mhm.
10 and wild and the most amazing addition to my world. What she has brought into me with the way she sees the world and what is important to her. And it's beautiful. It's changed everything for me.
This is incredibly beautiful. There's nothing I never hear a story that makes me think there's anything bad about adding more love to your life. It's
Yes,
never a mistake to add more love to your life.
I agree. I have always agreed. And to me, there's nothing that has ever come close to the feeling of being a mom and having that connection with a kid, never mind
Mhm.
5 of them,
Yeah.
and working it out and figuring them out. And
I cannot express I feel like as you were describing the 2 big choices in your life, I just got so emotional. I love
mm,
everything that you're saying.
oh,
Like, some of the best advice that I ever got from a weird place was, like, kind of figure out what it is that you need to live on for the rest of your life at some point,
yes,
and then just
yes.
stop, and then just, like, literally walk away.
Yeah.
And I think my show ending coincided with when I actually did need to walk away. So it kind of just happened on its own.
Right.
But making that choice is very hard. I'm sure people tried to convince you not to.
Well, yes, especially the career choice. People were like, "Are
Yeah.
you out of your mind? You're
Yeah.
never going to make this money again. You're never going to have this much
Yeah.
power." And I'm like, power's not all it's cracked up to be. I got to tell you,
Right.
it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. And you're
Yes.
just one person. No matter how successful you get in whatever industry,
Right.
you're just one person and you have one, pizza pie, and how you slice your time and what you
Hmm.
give attention to. And you have to create, slices that get smaller and smaller as we get older and older.
Right.
And how do you want your last 30 summers to look? If you're
Exactly.
lucky enough to have 30 more summers at 61,
Hmm.
what do you want the last 25 years to be?
Yeah.
How do you want to spend that time? And
Don't you think people, I think actually here in particular in the States, we really have trouble figuring out what is enough.
yes,
We can't grapple with the concept that we could possibly have enough.
it's so true. When my show was about to end, I was at dinner with Nora Ephron in
Hmm.
Hollywood and Steve Martin and Martin Short. And,
Hmm.
it was like that group, right?
Yeah.
Nora's power group. And I was there and they were like, I remember Steve Martin saying, "So you're really going to leave?" I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, why would you?" I said, "Well, you know what? I really have more than enough money."
Right.
And there was dead silence at the table. Dead silence.
Right.
And Steve goes, "I don't believe that sentence has ever been uttered in Hollywood." I was like,
I think that's true.
yeah, at some point you have enough, and if
Yeah.
you don't realize that you have enough, what a waste of your life,
What a
what a waste.
waste. Yes, defining success is it's a very tricky business here. It's so
Hmm.
tricky that I think people achieve great height. I mean, I'm just rambling, but I do think people achieve success here by any reasonable measure, but still don't think that they have achieved it.
I so agree. I so agree. And I used to say, years ago to Madonna, I would be like, Mo, you won every race there is. You can take off the sneakers. You don't
Yeah.
got to run anymore.
You
You're
don't.
Madonna. It's
You-
done.
You're a goddamn
Right?
legend. You're
Yes.
a
You're a
legend worldwide,
meteoric,
global.
generational talent, global,
Yeah.
international.
Hmm.
How do you top that? Or why do you think you would need to? That's what sort
Right.
of, I remember thinking when I was on my show, thinking about Oprah, that, here she was the richest woman in the world. And
Hmm.
I always would say, I would take that Stedman and be on an island in Hawaii and you would never
Right.
see me again.
That's right, and then they are in Hawaii, but they still keep doing
Yes.
other stuff. I'm like, "What is
Well,
going
I guess when
on?"
you're, one of the most powerful people in the world, it's
Mhm,
hard to step down from that in some ways. And she doesn't have children. I know she has career and she has close friends and she
mhm.
has Stedman, but and I'm not talking out of school here because
Yeah.
I don't call her. I'm not, I know her when I see her. We're cordial, but I don't
Mhm.
call her up at least anymore. I did call her once when I was very sad after Columbine, and I
Mhm.
said somebody erase her number from my phone
Or I'm gonna
because
call her a
I
lot.
had a couple
I
drinks and
can't.
I was like, "Listen, I think we need to do something, Oprah Winfrey." And this is like 1997. I'm sure she's thinking, "What the hell have I gotten myself into?"
You're like, you when you drunk dial someone, it's Oprah, like,
Yes.
it's literal
Only
Oprah.
once. It was
Okay.
once I drunk dialed, hysterical dialed, more even than drunk. It was like my hysterical crying. And
Right.
she was, pretty good. She didn't flip out. She
That's
sent me flowers the next day, said, "I hope you're okay."
that's nice. But,
Lose
like
my number, bitch. No.
yeah, please throw your phone in the ocean.